Hey, everybody. This is what you're seeing in front of you is the San Saba mission I talked about in the previous podcast. We're going to talk about, or I'm going to talk about the San Saba mission next week. You're going to read about it in Gwen. It was a Spanish mission that was destroyed. It was northwest of San Antonio, about 100 miles. And it was destroyed by Apache Indians or Comanche Indians, rather, and their allies in the 1750s. But the significance of it for you right now is it gives a sense of what a mission would have looked like, just how rudimentary it was. Hopefully, a lot of you have been to the beautiful Spanish missions along the San Antonio River in Texas. Of course, the Alamo, it was first Mission Valero. It was established in the after 1718. So if you've been to the Alamo, you've been to a Spanish mission, but there's 4 other missions strung along the San Antonio River. Also, you do have an extra credit opportunity that I'll talk about, where if you go to a mission, 2 missions rather, and you take pictures of yourselves at the missions, you'll get 2 points on your final grade, but I'll talk about that later. So this is what the initial missions would have looked like, not the beautiful stone structures, the ruins of which we look at today, which I think are extremely powerful. They're, in fact, the missions along the San Antonio River are part of the UNESCO UN historical sites, world historical sites. They've been designated as so important. But in the missions that I talked about in the 1690s in East Texas, they wouldn't have been anything like that. They just would have been wooden. They would have been extremely raw, very rudimentary. And as I talked about in my previous podcast, the Spanish attempt to missionize the Caddoans in the 1690s was a complete failure. So what I want to talk about now is what did the Spanish do next? They've been defeated or they've been run out of what's now East Texas, kind of that borderlands area between Louisiana and Texas. The border wasn't that well defined during that period. So they've been run out of that area into the interior of Mexico. But they're pretty determined. You know, you have to give the Spanish credit. They're very, very determined. And they want to make sure that they hold Texas, Spanish Texas, for Spain. They don't want the French coming into Spanish Texas and taking it. So they need basically an outpost in Texas. And also, it's not insignificant. They did believe that the Caddoan people could be Christianized, and they want to finish the job. A lot of the Franciscan priest in this area of the world had thought that when it came to Christianizing what's now Texas Indians, the Spanish had been a failure. And of course, they had been. They hadn't Christianized any Indians in Texas. So let me find the map here. So here's that map that I have up, and I'll send you a link to that. So this is the Texas. By the way, this is how the Spanish saw Texas, and I've probably mentioned this before. Just this area here. From the Spanish point of view, Texas was not the way we see Texas at all. It was basically what we would see as being East Texas and Central Texas. So here's that area where the Spanish had settled or tried to settle missions in the 1690s, and they had gotten driven out by the Caddoan. Notice there's quite a few missions. I really could make your life miserable by talking about the missions, but I try to keep it down to a minimum. The most successful missions ultimately will be in San Antonio, but I'll talk about that in a podcast. But something happens first. And what happens is that after the failure of the East Texas mission, the Spanish in Mexico City decide, okay, we've got to build an infrastructure in our Northeast. It was just too big a reach before. And so what happens is a very industrious priest by the name of Father Hidalgo, what he does is he comes up to this crossing area on the Rio Grande. And I want you to remember the Rio Grande isn't a border now. The Rio Grande is well within Spanish Texas. It's not an international border like it is today and has been since 1848. It's the major river in this region, i.e., the Rio Grande or the Rio Bravo. That's why it's called that, because this is a semi-desert area, and this was the major waterway in this area. And Father Hidalgo creates a mission called San Juan Bautista in about 1700. This mission is incredibly important. You're going to be tested on it. It'll show up on your midterm. It'll show up on your quizzes. So this is something you need to know. Now, San Juan Bautista is not famous today. It's kind of gotten lost, except for Texas historians, because it sits on the Mexican side of what's now the Mexican side of the Rio Grande River. It's south of Guerrero, Mexico. It's about 30 miles south on the Mexican side of Eagle Pass. The reason it was located there were a number of crossings along the Rio Grande at that point where the river was shallow and it was easy to get across the river there. So it wasn't random that the Spanish created San Juan Bautista there. It was very, very carefully thought out. And San Juan Bautista is considered the mother mission of Texas because it's from San Juan Bautista that a number of expeditions into Texas originated, or they went through San Juan Bautista. Think of it as a Buc-ee's. Let's make it a secular. Let's forget about the religious aspect of it. It was kind of the Buc-ee's of the Rio Grande. It was a place that people would go to. They could cross it. They could get supplies there. It was easy to cross there because the river was pretty low there. And for really 150, 160 years, this was one of the major transportation routes between, say, San Antonio, which is created in 1718. It's not created yet, but it's on the verge of being created, into the interior of Mexico. So San Juan Bautista is right on the road between the deep interior of Mexico, including Monterrey, which is in Nuevo León, and including Mexico City. If you were coming up into Spanish Texas, you would most likely go through San Juan Bautista. So that's the significance of San Juan Bautista. It's what the Spanish are doing basically is building a mission infrastructure that's going to allow them ultimately, within a couple of decades after the Spanish build San Juan Bautista, to create missions in the area that we now consider Texas, the north side of the Rio Grande. So what we have between the failure of these Texas missions in the 1690s and the creation of sites such as San Antonio, where you're going to school now, in 1718, the Mexicans start building a mission infrastructure that also serves as kind of a home base, a place you could provision. It was also a place, of course, that tried to convert the Indian groups that lived in this area as well. And if you were going into Spanish Texas, you would go through San Juan Bautista. Even during the US period, if you were trying to get to Monterrey from San Antonio, you would travel down the road that the Spanish traveled across Eagle Pass into the interior of Mexico. So San Juan Bautista, very, very significant mission. It's considered the mother mission of Texas, because it becomes the place where folks, when they want to travel into Spanish Texas, the vast majority of folks that traveled into Spanish Texas from the interior of Mexico, places like Mexico City, they wind their way up to the northeast and they cross the Rio Grande at San Juan Bautista, which was founded in 1700 by a Franciscan priest, Father Hidalgo. And like I say, I know y'all hate facts and figures and dates and blah, blah, blah. This is something you'll need to know. I want you to know about San Juan Bautista, the significance of San Juan Bautista. Today, there are ruins of San Juan Bautista, but it's almost completely gone. You can hardly tell that there was ever a mission there. San Juan Bautista has almost completely disappeared from the earth, unlike the missions in San Antonio. Also, it's on the Mexican side of the river, and sadly, tragically, that's a very dangerous place in 2022 because of the cartel wars and the drug smuggling. But nonetheless, it was there, it was important, and you need to know it to understand this period of Texas history.